The moment you explain yourself to the world begins to own you. There is a silence that builds empires. There is a quietness that most men mistake for weakness, but which is, in truth, the most ferocious discipline a human being can exercise over the machinery of his own destiny. I have studied the lives of more than 500 men of great achievement. I have sat in the offices of Andrew Carnegie and walked the factory floors of Henry Ford. I have watched men rise from poverty so complete that they had nothing to eat for 3 consecutive days, and I have watched those same men, years later, employ thousands. And in all of my study, across all of my observation, one pattern revealed itself to me with the clarity of lightning on a dark field. The men who succeeded, truly succeeded, not the flash-in-the-pan success that burns bright and collapses, those men shared one habit that the failures never developed. They did not announce themselves. They did not explain their plans. They did not seek the approval of the crowd before they had earned the right to demand it. They worked in silence, and the silence worked for them. Now I know what you are thinking. You are thinking that this is a small thing, a trivial observation. You are thinking that surely the great secrets of achievement have more grandeur than a warning about keeping your mouth shut. But I want you to understand something, and I want you to understand it deeply, down in the marrow of your bones where belief is born. The reason most human beings never achieve the one great thing they were placed on this earth to achieve is not because they lacked intelligence. It is not because they lacked opportunity. It is not even because they lacked courage in the grand theatrical sense of the word. It is because they scattered their energy. They diluted their desire. They traded the electric private fire of a burning purpose for the cold comfort of someone else's nodding head. You have done this. If you have decided definitely what you want most, what you may open the achievement, you have done this more times than you care to count. You had an idea. It was alive in you. It was real. You could feel the shape of it, the weight of it, the possibility of it pressing against the inside. You've decided definitely that needed to be born, and then you told someone, maybe a friend, maybe a family member who loved you and meant well, maybe someone over coffee or across a dinner table, and the moment those words left your mouth, something changed. The idea, which had been a fire, became a story. And stories, unlike fires, do not burn anything down. Stories are told, and then they are over. And so the idea was over. Not because the person laughed at you, though perhaps they did, but because the act of telling became, in your nervous system, a substitute for the act of doing. This is the hidden danger. Not criticism, not mockery, not the cruelty of small minds confronting a large vision. The hidden danger is that the human brain, when it hears itself describe a future achievement in vivid enough terms, begins to register a pale shadow of the satisfaction that achievement would have brought. You get a taste of the thing without doing the thing. And that taste, thin, unsatisfying, dishonest, is enough to take the edge off your hunger. And it is your hunger that would have driven you forward. Without hunger, there is no movement. Without movement, there is no momentum. Without momentum, there is nothing but the slow, quiet tragedy of a life that almost was. I want to talk to you about the nature of desire, because desire is the starting point of all achievement. And I do not think most people truly understand what desire means. They confuse desire with wishing. They confuse it with wanting in the passive, comfortable sense of the word. Wishing is what a man does when he has given up. Wishing is the activity of the defeated spirit trying to convince itself that it still participates in life. Desire, genuine desire. The kind of desire that builds railroads and invents the phonograph and raises a man from a penniless immigrant to the master of an industry. That kind of desire is a different animal entirely. It is obsessive. It is consuming. It does not sleep. It is present in the morning when your eyes open, and it is the last thing that visits you before sleep takes you. And even in sleep it is working, churning, assembling the materials of your future from the raw clay of your imagination. That kind of desire cannot afford to be diluted. That kind of desire is not entertainment. It is not a story you tell. It is a force you harness. And the first law of harnessing any force is that you do not bleed it off into the atmosphere where it serves nothing and no one. Think of the great Thomas Edison. When Edison was working on the incandescent light, he failed, by his own count, more than 10,000 times. 10,000. Now, I want you to sit with that number for a moment, because it is not a metaphor. It is a literal account of a man returning to the same problem, day after day, year after year, in the face of a world that had long since decided he was chasing something impossible. Investors grew impatient. Colleagues questioned his sanity. The press was not kind. And through all of it, Edison worked. He did not hold press conferences announcing his progress. He did not seek, in the moments of his darkest doubt, the reassurance of men who did not understand what he was building. He worked, he failed. He adjusted, he worked again. And on the 10,000th attempt, the filament held. The light came on. And when it did not merely illuminate a room in Menlo Park, New Jersey. It illuminated the very principle I am describing to you now. The principle that a burning desire, protected from the erosion of public opinion, accumulated through patient and persistent action, eventually produces results so complete, so total, so undeniable that the world has no choice but to receive them. Edison did not succeed despite his silence. He succeeded because of it. Now I want to tell you about a man whose name you do not know, because his name is not the point. I encountered this man in the early years of my research into the science of personal achievement. He was, when I first met him, working as a laborer in a manufacturing plant in the industrial Midwest. He had no formal education beyond the 8th grade. He had a wife, 3 children, and a weekly wage that was barely sufficient to keep them fed. But he had something else. He had an idea. A specific technical idea about a more efficient method of organizing a certain kind of industrial process. He had arrived at this idea through years of observation, the kind of patient, attentive observation that men of greater formal education sometimes neglect because they believe they already know what there is to know. I asked him when we spoke whether he had shared this idea with anyone. He looked at me with an expression I have never forgotten. It was not pride exactly. It was something quieter than pride. He said simply that he had not. He said that he had decided, before he told another living soul what he intended to do, he would first do it. He would first do it. He would prepare himself. He would educate himself in the areas where he was lacking. He would save what money he could. He would assemble the elements of his plan in the dark and in silence, and only when the plan was far enough along that no single person's skepticism could kill it, only then would he speak. He did not tell me this with arrogance. He told me this with the calm conviction of a man who had studied his own psychology carefully enough to know exactly what exposure to criticism would do to him before he was ready. He knew his own weakness. And knowing it, he defended against it, not by pretending the weakness did not exist, but by refusing to give it an opportunity to operate. 3 years later, that man owned his own small operation. 5 years after that, he employed 60 men. He had arrived, not through genius, not through inheritance, not through the intervention of luck or fate or fortune, but through the disciplined, deliberate protection of a desire that he refused to let the world touch before it was strong enough to withstand the world's touch. Before I continue, answer one question honestly. And I mean honestly, not with the answer that makes you feel comfortable, but with the answer that lives in the part of you that still knows the truth. How many of your greatest ideas have you talked to death before they had a chance to live? If you're still listening, something inside you is waking up. Good. Let it wake. Because what I am about to tell you is not merely practical advice about the management of information. It is a law of the mind. A law as real and as reliable as the law of gravity. And that law is this: your conscious mind, your deep, creative, infinitely powerful subconscious mind, the mechanism through which all achievement ultimately flows. That mind does not distinguish between a thing imagined in vivid detail and a thing actually accomplished. It responds to both with similar chemistry. It releases, in both cases, a degree of the energy that should be reserved entirely for action. When you talk about what you are going to do, your mind, at some level, begins to process it as something you have done. The tension relaxes. The hunger softens. The urgency, that beautiful, necessary urgency that is the engine of all meaningful effort, begins to quiet. And in the quieting of that urgency, your plans begin to die. This is why Carnegie built quietly. This is why Ford, who was considered eccentric by many of his contemporaries, was notoriously close-mouthed about his intentions until they were so far advanced in execution that their success was already virtually assured. These men were not secretive out of paranoia. They were not quiet out of social awkwardness or personal timidity. They were quiet because they had discovered through direct experience what I am telling you now through study and observation. They had discovered that the energy of a definite chief aim, that singular, obsessive, consuming purpose that Carnegie himself told me was the beginning of all great achievement, is a finite resource until it is fed by action. And every time you speak it into a room full of people who have not earned the right to hear it, you spend a portion of that resource for nothing. Let me tell you what a definite chief aim actually is, because I believe the concept is widely misunderstood by the people who most need to understand it. A definite chief aim is not a goal. It is not a resolution made on New Year's morning that is forgotten by February. It is not a vague aspiration toward comfort or security or the reduction of suffering. A definite chief aim is a specific, measurable, time-bound declaration of exactly what you intend to achieve, backed by a plan for its achievement, powered by a desire so strong that it colors every waking moment of your existence. It is the one thing, the single, central, organizing purpose around which all other activity is arranged. Everything that does not serve it is noise. Everything that does serve it is single. And your entire life, from the moment you crystallize this aim in your mind, becomes the disciplined practice of following signal and eliminating the noise. Most people never crystallize anything. They drift. They are moved by whatever current is strongest on any given day, the current of financial pressure, or the current of social expectation, or the current of habit, which is perhaps the most powerful current, all because it requires no external force to maintain itself. Habit is self-perpetuating. Drift is self-perpetuating. And the tragedy of drift is that it feels, from the inside, almost exactly like living. You are busy, you are active, things are happening around you, time is passing, none of it is moving you toward the one thing that would give your passage through this world the weight and dignity of genuine purpose. The drifter is not lazy, necessarily. The drifter is often, in fact, very busy. But the drifter's activity is scattered, unorganized, and therefore largely ineffective. It is like firing a rifle loaded with birdshot instead of a single bullet. The energy is the same, the noise is the same, but the force divided across 1,000 tiny pellets cannot penetrate anything that matters. The man with a definite chief aim is the man who is loaded single bullet, who has taken aim with both hands, controlled his breathing, and is prepared to fire once precisely at the one target that would change everything. I want to talk to you now about the fear of criticism, because it is intimately connected to the habit of talking too much about your plans, and it is one of the 6 basic fears that I identified across my decades of study as the primary obstacles to human achievement. The fear of criticism is insidious because it masquerades as humility. It presents itself as the reasonable caution of a thoughtful person. It whispers to you that you should be careful, that you should test your ideas against the responses of others before you commit too fully to them, that it would be arrogant and reckless to act without first consulting the judgment of the people around you. But here is the truth that the fear of criticism does not want you to know. The people around you, most of them, are not qualified to evaluate your vision. Not because they are stupid, not because they are malicious, though some are, but because they are limited by their own experience, their own imagination, their own willingness to believe in the possible. When you present your vision to a person of average imagination and ask them to evaluate it, you are asking them to measure something against a ruler they do not possess. They will give you an answer. They always give you an answer, but their answer will be calibrated to what they believe is achievable. And what they believe is achievable is determined by what they have already seen achieved. They cannot see what you see. And when you allow their inability to become your reason for not moving, you have handed your destiny to a blind man and asked him to navigate you across a mountain range. Do not do it. Do not give anyone that power. Not because their opinions do not matter in some general human sense, of course they matter in their proper place, but because in the matter of your definite chief aim, they are not qualified advisors. The only qualified advisor you have is the persistent, burning, clarifying voice of your own desire, tested not against the approval of the crowd, but against the hard resistance of reality, encountered through action. And this brings me to what I consider the master key of achievement, the one principle that, if you absorb it fully, will change the operational logic of your entire life. That principle is this: faith is not a feeling you wait to receive. Faith is a posture you assume through action. You do not sit still and cultivate faith and then, when faith is sufficiently strong, begin to act. You act first, imperfectly, incompletely, with the tools and knowledge you currently possess. And in the acting, faith develops. In the moving, courage accumulates. In the doing, the doubt that was so paralyzing when you were sitting still reveals itself to be far less substantial than it appeared. It is like a paper wall. It looks from a distance like solid brick. But if you simply walk forward, you discover that it tears. And on the other side of it there is more road. You think it, you feel it, you act on it, you become it. This is the rhythm of all genuine achievement. Not a straight line from inspiration to arrival, but a spiral. Upward if you maintain your direction, but requiring that you remain in motion. The moment you stop moving is the moment the paper wall begins to look like brick again. The moment you begin explaining yourself to people who would prefer that you stop. Or worse, the moment you begin seeking their approval as a substitute for your own forward motion, is the moment you step off the spiral and begin the long, quiet drift back to where you started. I'm going to talk to you about Andrew Carnegie because Carnegie's life is in many ways the most complete illustration I know of every principle I have described. Carnegie arrived in this country with nothing, not nothing in the romantic Hollywood sense of the word, but nothing in the literal sense. No money, no connections, no formal education, no advantages of any kind beyond the advantages that exist in every human mind and that most human minds never develop. He was a telegraph operator, then a railroad man, then a businessman. And at each stage of his development, he did not announce his intentions prematurely. He prepared, he observed, he learned from the men around him who knew things he did not yet know. He organized his thinking, organized his resources, organized his relationships, and when he was ready, truly ready, not merely impatient, he moved. And he moved with a decisiveness that left very little to chance. Carnegie once told me that the secret of his success could be stated in a sentence so simple that most men would dismiss it without fully considering its implications. He said, "Decide what you want, write it down, work for it every day, and never tell anyone who might talk you out of it before you have made it impossible to be talked out of it. Never tell anyone who might talk you out of it before you have made it impossible to be talked out of it." Think about that. Think about the precision of that statement. He did not say, never tell anyone. He did not say, live in isolation. He said, know which conversations can kill your dream and have the discipline to postpone those conversations until your dream is armored enough to survive them. Most people do the opposite. They tell everyone immediately, including the most dangerous people, the ones who love them and therefore feel entitled to be honest in ways that are not always helpful, and they do it at the most vulnerable moment, when the idea is newest and least protected. This is like introducing an infant, hours old, to a November wind and wondering why the infant does not thrive. Newborn things require protection. Newborn ideas require the same. There is an unnamed miner I want to tell you about. He worked in the gold rush era, one of thousands of men who arrived in California with nothing but a shovel and a belief that the earth was generous and that persistence would be rewarded. He dug for 3 years. 3 years of back-breaking labor in conditions that would have defeated most men in 3 months. He went down day after day into ground that refused to give. The gold did not come. His money ran thin. His hams were ruined. And finally, he stopped. He sold his equipment to another man for almost nothing. He went back east defeated, certain that the earth had lied to him, that the promise of abundance had been a cruel fiction. The man who bought his equipment dug 3 feet further. 3 feet further, and he struck one of the richest veins in the history of California mining. 3 feet? The difference between a life of bitter defeat and a life of extraordinary abundance was 3 feet of ground and the persistence to reach it. And the first miner never knew. He stopped and went back east and spent the rest of his life wondering if he had been born unlucky, never understanding that luck had nothing to do with it, that the vein was there the entire time, that the earth had not lied, that his belief had been correct and his body had been capable, and his only failure, his one fatal, irreversible failure, was that he had decided to stop at the moment when stopping was most expensive. Do not stop 3 feet from the goal. This is persistence, not the dramatic, theatrical persistence of a man making a grand speech about his refusal to surrender. Quiet persistence, daily persistence, the persistence of a man who knows where he is going and simply refuses to stop going there, regardless of what the day presents, regardless of whether he is praised or doubted, regardless of whether the people in his life understand what he is doing or think he is wasting his time. Persistence is the one quality that cannot be faked and cannot be acquired second-hand. You either persist or you do not. And the difference between a man who persists and a man who does not is almost never a difference in talent, intelligence, or opportunity. It is almost always a difference in the clarity of purpose. The man who persists does so because he has a reason to persist that is larger than the obstacles he encounters. The man who quits does so because, in the end, his reasons for continuing were not as strong as the weight of the resistance. This is why the definiteness of your aim is not an abstract spiritual matter. It is a practical operational necessity. The clearer and more specific and more emotionally charged your purpose, the more resistance it can absorb before it begins to soften. The vaguer your purpose, the less defined, the less felt, the more it exists as a pleasant general direction rather than a burning specific destination, the less resistance it can absorb. A vague purpose collapses at the first serious obstacle. A definite chief aim, held with genuine conviction, backed by a plan, fueled by daily action, absorbs obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. It does not merely survive adversity. It is strengthened by it. This is the paradox that most people cannot accept because it requires them to reframe every failure, every setback, every defeat, every closed door, every unfair circumstance. To reframe all of it, not as evidence that the journey is wrong, but as material from which the journey is built. Every obstacle contains within it the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit. This is not a comforting platitude. It is a structural law of human development. The muscle does not grow without resistance. The character does not deepen without adversity. The plan does not improve without the pressure of failure revealing its weaknesses. If everything came easily, you would arrive at your destination smaller than you need to be to sustain what you have built. The obstacles are not interruptions of the journey. The obstacles are the journey. But, Diane, this matters enormously. You can only see the seed within the obstacle if your desire is strong enough and clear enough and protected enough to sustain your vision during the darkness between setback and understanding. Which brings me back always to where I began, to silence, to protection, to the discipline of not handing your dream to the world before the dream is strong enough to withstand the world's hands. Let me describe to you the decision that changes everything. Not a complicated decision, not a decision that requires great resources or rare opportunities or fortunate circumstances. The decision that changes everything is simply this: to stop drifting and to start directing. To take the formless, scattered energy of a life lived in reaction to circumstances and to compress it, focus it, aim it at a single definite purpose and then refuse. Absolutely and without apology refuse to allow that purpose to be diluted by the doubt of people who have not earned the right to doubt it. This is a decision you can make today, not next year when circumstances are better, not when you have more money, more time, more support, more evidence that you are not wasting your effort. Today, in the next hour, in the next moment, if you are ready for it. Decide what you want. Be specific. Be ruthless in your specificity, because vagueness is where dreams go to become wishes, and wishes are where potential goes to die quietly. Write it down, not as a note you will forget. Write it as a declaration, as a contract with yourself. Give it a deadline. Give it a plan, however rough, however incomplete, because a rough plan that you act on is infinitely more powerful than a perfect plan that remains in your imagination. Assign a price to it. Determine what you are willing to give in exchange for it, because nothing of value is obtained without exchange, and then begin giving that price today. Not all at once, perhaps, but begin, and then be quiet about it. Not forever, not in the manner of a man who is ashamed of his ambitions, but quiet in the manner of a man who knows the value of what he carries and refuses to spend it on the cheap currency of temporary approval. Let your work speak before you do. Let your riz make you before you do. Let your results introduce you before your words have the chance to disappoint the expectation they create. You think it, you feel it, you act on it, you become it. This is not philosophy, this is not theory. This is the distilled observation of a lifetime spent in the company of men who built things that lasted, and men who meant to build things that lasted, and men who meant to build things that lasted but never quite did. The difference between them was almost never what you would expect. It was not intelligence. It was not talent. It was not luck, though luck played its part. It was the quiet, daily, almost invisible discipline of a man who had decided, really decided, in the deep, irreversible way that changes behavior rather than merely intentions, what he was going to do with his one passage through this world. The world is full of people who are going to do something great, who had the idea once and told too many people too soon and watched it dissipate into the ordinary air of ordinary conversation, who encountered the first real obstacle and, having no reserve of protected desire to draw upon, folded, who drifted through years of almost beginning and nearly starting and one day I will, until the years became a kind of permanent condition, and they almost became the answer to every question anyone ever asked them about their lives. Do not be that person. You are not that person. I know you are not that person because that person stopped listening long before now. That person cannot sit with the discomfort of being told the truth about what they have been doing with their time and their energy and their remarkable, unrepeatable temporary life. You are still here, and that means the fire is still in you. Smaller, perhaps, than it was, quieter than it deserves to be, but alive. The ember is there, and an ember, properly tended, properly protected from the winds that would extinguish it before it has the chance to become what it was always meant to become. An ember like that is the beginning of everything, of the invention, of the industry, of the legacy, of the life that, when it is over, will have been worth the living. Protect your fire. Work in silence. Let the results be loud. Decide today who you are becoming, and then become that person in the dark, away from the noise of other people's opinions and other people's fears and other people's comfortable certainty that the thing you are attempting cannot be done. Everything that has ever been built was built by someone who was told at some point that it could not be done. And the builders kept working anyway, not because they did not hear the doubt, but because their desire, specific, obsessive, protected, daily fed, was louder than the doubt, always, by just enough, louder than the doubt. That is all it requires. Not silence forever, just long enough, until the thing is built, until the work has spoken for itself, until the results are standing in the room where the doubt used to live, and the doubt has nowhere left to stand. Never tell people what you do. Show them what you have done, and let the distance between those two sentences be filled entirely with work. If something in these words found the part of you that is still reaching, still believing, still quietly certain that you are built for more than you have so far allowed yourself to become, then do not keep this to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, someone whose fire is low, someone who has been talking when they should have been working, or waiting when they should have been deciding, or explaining when they should have been deciding, or explaining when they should have been deciding. Building. The greatest gift you can give another person is the truth that ignites them. Pass it on.